Hello, my friends, and welcome to another story time with Miss Karamy from the Crystal Lake Public Library. How are you? Are you good? I was talking to one of my brothers the other day, and he reminded me of a very special book that my mom read to all of us when we were very small. And I'm very old now, and this book is very old, and it took me a very long time to find it in the library because I don't know that a lot of libraries know about it anymore. I wanted to take a few minutes in this story time to talk to the grown-ups for a second. And I just wanted to say, you guys are doing such a good job. You are. It's a very hard time right now sometimes when you just feel like you're treading water and everything is so big. But you know the best thing? I remember the best thing when I was little and I could tell that things were stressing and a little bit hard was I liked to cuddle up and sit on my mom's lap or my dad's lap or my grandma's lap or a grown-up that I just loved so much, and I would bring them a book and they would stop what they were doing and tell me the story. And it always made me feel better. It did. But being a mom now, which has been my favorite job by far, I love to tell my kids stories because it just made me stop for a minute and feel those same feelings that I felt when I sat on my mom's lap or my dad's lap or my grandma's lap or a grown-up's lap and had them read me a story. Yeah, one of my favorite times. It really was. And I bet you have very good memories of stories being told to you, and you all have a favorite story. It was very surprising to me that my brother's story was one of my favorite stories too. And I bet my other 3 brothers remember this story too. But I just wanted to say thanks, Mom, for reading this story to us, because now I get to share it with you. It's one of my favorites. It is by Doris Burn, and it is called Andrew Henry's Meadow. And it's about a very special boy. And I always thought I wanted to be a boy when I was a little kid because I had 4 amazing brothers, and they were strong and funny and outgoing and adventurous and a little bit crazy. And the thing I didn't realize at the time was I was all those things too. Yeah, I was. I bet you didn't think I was a little crazy, but I was. But this book is special to me, and I wanted to share it with you. So here we go. Andrew Henry's Meadow. Until that spring, Andrew Henry Thatcher lived with his family in the town of Stubbsville. He had a father and a mother and 2 older sisters named Marion and Martha. The girls were always with each other. He also had 2 younger brothers named Robert and Ronald, and they were always with each other too. See, that was just like us. There were 5 of us. And I was the only girl. Yes, that's a special thing. It is. Andrew Henry was in the middle. He was always with himself, yet he didn't mind. He had plenty of things to do. Mrs. Thatcher was usually busy in the kitchen, and Mr. Thatcher was tired when he came home from work. He liked to read the paper and have things quiet. Marion and Martha liked to dress up or try new ways to wear their hair. And Robert and Ronald liked to play with toy cars and coloring books. But Andrew Henry liked to build things. Look at that. Look at that amazing contraption. It's pretty spectacular. Mrs. Thatcher was unhappy when Andrew Henry built a helicopter in the kitchen. In the kitchen? That would be amazing, I think. The helicopter had many fine features. Nonetheless, she said to him firmly, "Andrew Henry, I have work to do. You must take that thing out of the kitchen." Yeah, the kitchens can get crowded when you're cooking, right? Yeah. Then, Andrew Henry built an eagle's cage in the living room. Wow. And Mr. Thatcher was annoyed. It was a fine eagle's cage. An eagle would have liked it, But Mr. Thatcher didn't. He told Andrew Henry to go outside and to take the eagle's cage with him. It's a fine eagle's cage. It just might not be for the living room, right? When Marion and Martha saw the merry-go-round that Andrew Henry hitched to their sewing machine, they were upset. It went around nicely too, but they told him to unhitch it and to do it right now. Robert and Ronald didn't even like the system of pulleys that Andrew Henry rigged up in their room, although it could close the door, fetch the crayon box, and lift the table 1.5 feet off the floor. Wow. They cried, "Andrew Henry, you're always ruining our fun. Leave us alone." Poor Andrew Henry. Andrew Henry thought about it more and more, and one fine spring morning, he made up his mind. Quietly, he gathered his tools. He packed his hammer and his saw, his pocket knife and his pliers, his big sack of nails, some bolts, some nuts and wire, and even a few lengths of stovepipe. "I will build a house for myself," he said, and he went out the back door and down the path. He knew where he was going. No one saw Andrew Henry leave except the Thatcher's dog, Sam. As usual, Sam started to follow Andrew Henry, but this time Andrew Henry told him firmly that he must stay home, and Sam was a good dog. So he sat down by the gate in the shade of the lilac bush and watched until Andrew Henry was out of sight. Ooh, I do love a lilac bush. They smell so good. Andrew Henry walked kitty-corner through the burdock pasture. He climbed up over Blackbriar Hill. That's a fun hill. Then he went out over the Warzebicki's swamp and in through the deep woods. He's very brave. He must have explored these woods before. I love to explore the woods. Finally, he came to a meadow. Now, a meadow is a very pretty, calm opening in the woods with lots of grass in a pretty space. That's a meadow. Sometimes it has flowers and butterflies and hopping crickets, and I do like a meadow. A stream wandered through the meadow, sparkling in the sunlight. On one side was a tall fir tree, straight and strong. Andrew Henry walked right over to the fir tree. He dropped his tools beside it and looked the ground over. "Here is where I will build my house," he said. "That looks like a fine place for a house. Wouldn't it be lonely?" I would think it would be very lonely. He set to work, and before long the house was finished. The walls were made of clay and rocks and poles, and the roof was made of fir boughs, and outside one window there was a fine landing for dragonflies. I love that. But Andrew Henry wasn't alone long. Soon Alice Burdock stepped out of the deep woods. She had bird things with her. Mr. Burdock, who was a farmer, did not care for birds. They ate his cherries, scratched up his corn, and nested in his barn. Birds like to do that, yep. He put scarecrows in the cornfield and tied tin cans to the cherry trees to scare away the birds. He even kept 4 cats in the barn to discourage the swallows from nesting there. But Alice liked birds. She had brought along what she could. "Andrew Henry, will you build a house for me too?" "Sure thing," said Andrew Henry. Wow, it was a nice house, especially for a person who liked birds. A ladder climbed straight up the house of the tree trunk. Wow. There were plenty of bird baths and feeding stations. There were bird houses and a balcony for watching birds, and even a handy rest for Alice's binoculars when she wasn't using them. That's very handy. Next, out of the deep woods came George Turner. He had most of his boats and all of his fishing poles and his biggest paddle wheel. Mrs. Turner didn't like him to use those things in the bathtub, and George wanted Andrew Henry to build him a house too. "Sure thing," Andrew Henry said. "First, They built a bridge over the creek, and then they built a house on that bridge so that George could be near the water. That's amazing. I love that. The house had docks for boats and built-in fishing poles. The paddle wheel worked, a fan to keep George cool. It was surprising how much power that paddle had. Do you see it spinning? Yeah. Then Joe Pulaski arrived. It's getting a little crowded. They built him a dugout house. The door was on the roof and the chimney stuck out of the ground. Joe wanted an underground house so that his pets would be comfortable. He had gray mice and white mice, a pet mole, and a pair of brown rabbits. The house had rooms and passageways for his pets. The mole's passages were wonderfully misleading. Jane O'Malley and Margaret Laporte showed up next, and Andrew Henry built Jane a house that looked like a castle with turrets. Look at that. That looks like a castle. And do you see all those crazy ways that all the animals can get out of Joe's house? It's amazing, isn't it? They dug a ditch around it, which filled up with water from the creek. The ditch made a useful moat, especially when the drawbridge was up. Wow. Jane had her dress-up clothes with her, and she hoped her mother wouldn't miss them too much. She explained that they made her feel like Lady Jane instead of just plain Jane. Fun clothes will do that. I do. I used to love to put on overalls and walk around in my dad's big boots. I did. I liked to pretend that I was a farmer. Margot's house was tall in the middle like a teepee, but it had a long, low entrance like an igloo. She needed privacy for her music. Visitors had to crawl on their stomachs. They also had to give 3 toots on the horn she had hung outside the door. Sometimes Margot didn't answer because she couldn't always hear the horn when she was practicing. Do you see that? That's kind of amazing, isn't it? And Andrew Henry, wow. Down the hill, across the swamp, and into the woods came 3 more children. Sarah Lerner had a cookie sheet full of mud cakes her mother had made her take out of the oven. Don Peterson had a dresser drawer full of dandelion seeds he had been saving for parachutes. Stanley Hayes had 2 racing toads his father wouldn't let him keep in the basement. Soon, 9 houses stood in the meadow. It looked like a small village. I think that looks amazing. But in Stubbsville, the Thatchers were looking for Andrew Henry, and the Burdocks were looking for Alice. And soon the Turners and the Pulaskis and the O'Malleys and the Laportes and the Lerners and the Petersons and the Hayeses all began looking for their missing children. Well, they should have left a note at least, I think. That's kind of scary. For 4 days. What? For 4 days and 4 nights, everyone searched frantically. They hunted the fields, the barns, the buildings, the vacant lots, but the children could not be found. I don't recommend that. I don't like that at all. That would be very scary to be a mom and not know. I don't like that at all. But let's see what happens. Let's see what happens to those kids in Andrew Henry's meadow. The only one who wasn't searching was the Thatcher's dog, Sam. Dogs are smart that way. He sat quietly under the lilac bush by the gate. Now, Sam was a good dog. He was, but he was very lonesome. As he gazed sorrowfully outward towards the far corner of Burdock's pasture, the loneliness in Sam grew and grew and grew until finally it grew too big for even a good dog. On the morning of the 5th day, Sam raised his head and out poured a long, aching howl. Oh! He sprang to his feet and raced to the near corner of the Burdock pasture. The townspeople all heard the howl and saw Sam racing off with his nose to the ground. What a good dog. The dog has found the trail. Follow Sam. Oh, hooray for Sam. Sam ran kitty-corner through the Burdock's pasture. The fathers and mothers, the sisters and brothers, and even the cats and the dogs of the missing children ran kitty-corner after him. What a commotion. They climbed up Blackbriar Hill and went across Warzipski Swamp and in through the deep woods. Do you see them? Look at that. Are they gonna find it? Until they came to a meadow. Yeah, it was Andrew Henry's meadow. Look at that. And there were all the children. That's amazing. It's amazing. What excitement. The 9 children, their parents, and all their sisters and brothers met with shouts of joy. They laughed and hugged each other. The fathers and mothers were too happy to scold or ask any questions. Their children were safe. Andrew Henry and his friends were happy too. They had been away from home for 4 long days and 4 very long nights. The village in the meadow had been wonderful. They would not forget it, but they missed their mothers and fathers, their sisters and brothers, and their cats and dogs, and they were all ready to go home. The Thatchers gave Andrew Henry a corner of the basement behind the furnace just to build his things in. He built a roller coaster for Robert and Ronald's toy cars. By using a bucket and parts from an electric fan, he made a hairdryer for Marion and Martha. The coffee mug he made for his father worked the same way a bird feeder does. And he was especially proud of the automatic table setter he made for his mom, although it did take up a lot of room. Andrew Henry was pleased to have such a fine workplace. And his family always seemed curious about what Andrew Henry was to build next. Look at that. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing what a kid can make, isn't it? You're so creative, and there are so many things that you can do with so many things, right? I know. What a great story. It's one of my favorites. It is. Thanks, Mom. Thanks for reading that book to us. And I'm really sorry for all the times we kind of made you go a little crazy. And sometimes as a kid, we just don't know that parents have important things going on too. And sometimes they have bad days and get a little flustered. And you know what the best thing we could do when our parents feel like that? Grab a book, curl up in their lap, and ask them to read you a story, because it will make them feel happy too. All right, my friends, I hope you pick the best book. I do. I hope you get a cuddle, and I hope you enjoy your story time, and tell your grown-up thank you for just being able to sit and cuddle with you. All right, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.